Everyone, welcome to the 2021 Spring Town Meeting, Town Manager Public Hearing. This Zoom call is being recorded and it could potentially be on WinCam. I just want to let you folks know. So the format for this evening, I'm going to go through all 30 articles and then I will be opening up the floor to questions. Patty from my office is here to assist. We also have in attendance Susan Verdicchio, the chairperson of the select board, who is also here. I'm going to ask that, given the attendance that we have right now, that when we get to the comment and question portion, if you could please limit your remarks and questions on the articles that you're discussing to about 5 minutes. And if you can, please refer to the article that you are asking or commenting on. There is an ability for you to ask a question via the Q&A button on your Zoom. So please use that. You can certainly use the chat function, especially if you can't hear or you have any logistical questions. But if you do have any questions you want to post, please put those in the Q&A chat. So the Q&A, not the chat. Okay, so town meeting is scheduled to begin next Monday, April 26th at 7:30. It is a remote town meeting. It will continue on the following Monday, May 3rd, to hear the budget and other items, and it is also potentially slated to continue that following Thursday. Want to review some resources and materials that are available. You can go to the town website at winchester.us. You can search or click on the town meeting button and you will see a number of links for the current town meeting as well as past archived information. So you will find things like the motion book and the warrant. You'll also find reports from the various committees. So the Finance Committee has a fiscal year 22 budget book. And then the Capital Planning Committee has their spring 2021 capital planning report. There's also a link to the Waterfield Land Disposition Agreement, which is part of Article 6. And my understanding is that there is a personnel board meeting tonight. So hopefully the personnel board will draft or finish drafting the personnel board article. And once that's done, we will also place that, that draft on this page. There will be a number of preliminary motions prior to getting into the articles due to the ongoing COVID pandemic. For example, there will need to be a vote on actually having a remote town meeting. There are also motions to appoint a deputy moderator and then also to continue during the town meeting to successive Thursday and Monday schedule, and then also to allow that WinCam covered town meeting. Article 1 is part of a consent agenda. You will see at the top, if it's part of the proposed consent agenda, it will say consent at the top. And then next to it will be the vote that's needed, whether it's a majority vote, a 2/3 vote, or in one case, a 4/5 vote. So articles that are part of the consent agenda can be approved at once. They can also, individual articles can be taken out by the vote of any 5 members of town meeting to take that item out of the consent agenda and vote on that individually. The first article are the video and written reports by elected boards and town officials. Those are also either aired on WinCam and or put on the town website for viewing as well after. Article 2, this is a planning board report. This is typically part of the regular reporting of elected boards and town officials. They just requested that there would be a separate article for their report. Article 3, this is an amendment to a zoning bylaw. And this was actually part of a planning board public hearing held on March 23rd. Article 4, this is a follow-up to a 2020 fall town meeting vote. This adds a section to the town meeting part of the Code of Bylaws that outline procedures for electronic recording and tabulation of votes. Article 5, this change would create an option for the town to hold an annual March local election on a non-work, non-school day to allow flexibility to respond to changing circumstances. We've been holding voting at middle and elementary schools on a weekday when school is normally in session, and that has been disruptive and raises some safety and building concerns. Article 6, this is another follow-up from the 2020 fall town meeting vote for the land disposition agreement and terms of the ground lease for the Waterfield lot to come back to town meeting for approval. So this is for a mixed income, mixed use affordable housing project. It's a 99-year lease with an initial rent payment of $1 million, as well as provisions for an annual rent payment, permitted uses, and maintenance and capital requirements. Article 7, this is a follow-up from the 2018 fall town meeting that authorized the select board to dispose of 20 Glenwood Avenue, which was acquired by the town through the tax title foreclosure process. The original vote stipulated that the property would be redeveloped for affordable housing. However, the costs to do so are prohibitive. So this article seeks to remove that restriction and that the proceeds from the sale go to the Winchester Housing Trust Fund. Article 8. This motion would authorize the select board to petition the general court for the state legislature to enact special legislation to permit the town to create a bylaw to be able to charge a building permit surcharge for the purposes of funding sustainability initiatives in the town and to establish a special revenue fund to receive the proceeds of that surcharge. So an example of the use of this fund would be for a sustainability director and other priorities as outlined in the climate action plan. Article 9 is a consent article to fund operations that exceed the approved budget. So in this case, snow and ice expenditures, we budget $400,000 every year. That doesn't change. So anything over that amount, and also in this case for legal expenses. Article 10 is also a consent article to pay for bills from the prior year that did not come in time to be encumbered. In this case, it's a $5,000 expense that went to the planning office from the area planning council. Article 11, this is for water and sewer rates. The select board has typically voted on an annual rate increase every year. This year, the select board is recommending a 3% increase in rates for consumption on or after March 1st, 2021 to cover bills that will be issued in fiscal year 22. Article 12 is also a consent article to transfer funds from the parking meter fund to other accounts to pay for parking related expenses. Article 13 is a consent article to appropriate funds that come in from the cable companies to WinCam. Article 14 is to accept the capital planning committee report. And the next few articles are appropriations towards capital projects. So Article 15 is $201,200 to be appropriated for the transfer station design project, consisting of engineering, design, permitting, and planning expenses related to remodeling, reconstructing, and making extraordinary repairs to the town's transfer station facility and cleaning up pollution caused by the closed incinerator. Article 16 is $305,000 to be appropriated for the construction of traffic improvements at the intersection of Waterfield Road and Church Street. At a previous town meeting, the 2019 fall town meeting, there was some funding that was approved. Then this is an addition to that. Article 17, this is $270,000 to be appropriated for the Main Street Bridge project, specifically the replacing and or repair of the concrete rails and all the costs related to that. Article 19 Article 18 and 19 are related to the recent vote to support repairs at Morocco Elementary School and for the culverts at Morocco for flood mitigation purposes. So Article 18 is for the $9.1 million appropriation for those culverts. So Article 18 and Article 19 is about $3.6 million for repairs at the Morocco Elementary School. So the next few articles are related to the budget. So Article 20 is the fiscal year 2020 budget that was developed by the Finance Committee. Their report should be on that town website under town meeting, and there will be a yellow sheet where town meeting will vote on those various expense line items. And fiscal year 22 is the water and sewer enterprise funds. Article 22 relates to funding for the recreation fund. Article 23 is the personnel board article. So this is being finalized tonight at the personnel board meeting. This will include reclassification of various positions. The majority of it you will see are in the recreation department. There is also a proposed cost of living increase and adding a step to the non-union compensation schedules. Those two items are what comprises the unallocated wage budget that is part of the fiscal year 22 budget. Article 24, this is to fund expenses related to the COVID-19 response. There are three separate motions. The first one is to the Board of Health. This is $240,000 for testing, professional services, overtime, supplies, and materials. The second motion has been recommended to be amended by the Finance Committee. So the $331,000 here will be cut in half, so it'll be $165,500. This is for the cleaning of school buildings and $10,000 for the building department. Article 25 is also a consent article to appropriate $30,000 to the Building Stabilization Fund for the debt service for the energy efficient boiler at Morocco. I believe that project was done almost a decade ago. Article 26, this is a consent article for various revolving funds, and you'll see a list of that on the screen. Everything from the Archive Center to Energy, Board of Health, Recreation, and the Historic Commission. Article 27 is also a consent article. This is something that we vote on annually to allow the treasurer to borrow funds in anticipation of revenues for the following fiscal year. Article 28 is also a consent article. This is to accept Chapter 90 funds from the state's Department of Transportation. We get this allocation every year. This is for maintenance, repair, and other improvements of townways. The funding has been around or just over 500,000. We're not quite sure the amount yet for this year. Article 29 is a standard article to use funds from the tax levy or transfer funds or take other action. This motion is dependent on other town meeting votes, and we provide this motion separately. And the last article is also a standard article, and we haven't received any motions yet under this article. Okay, so I'm going to see if Patty can help me figure out the order of questions or comments.
From Jeanette, the other two.
Okay, so I see one, I see two that were answered. And then Article 5, if voting is moved to a Saturday, would overtime need to be paid to the town clerk and others? If so, is there a budget for this? Would accommodations be made for those for religious reasons who could not vote on a Saturday? So there are expenses related to election time. There are volunteers. There's also custodians and other entities that there might be an additional cost for custodians to come in on a Saturday versus a weekday, but my understanding is that would be fairly minimal. It's budgeted on an annual basis. In terms of accommodations for those who cannot vote, for example, on a Saturday, there are provisions to vote absentee. So we do our best to advertise the dates and the forms that people need to fill out to be able to vote early.
Lisa, it's Susan. I could just chime in that, we acknowledge that Saturday is the Sabbath for a large segment of our community. Sunday's also the Sabbath for a lot of people as well. The clerk is very good about allowing people to vote absentee before the election. And we would consider finding more out about what Arlington does. The hope is that people can, be flexible, and we're looking towards maybe trying to also encourage people and get a higher turnout for our town elections. We don't know if Saturday voting would lead to that, but some advocates believe that it might, or some advocates nationally will say we should have, the national elections on Tuesday be a holiday, or things like that. It's difficult for working parents, or maybe for people who have very demanding jobs or very rigid jobs, or work, time shifts to get out and vote on a weekday. And as far as the, costs, of course, the town clerk would look into this in more detail. But right now, since it's just not allowed to vote on a Saturday, it seems unreasonable to expect her to put a lot of time and effort into investigating the costs. One of the things she is thinking about doing is sort of consolidating the precincts and not using all of the elementary schools, or, recall maybe consolidating a couple of, 4 precincts into the high school, or something around those lines. Just also to be prepared for the, we have building projects coming up for some of the elementary schools like Lynch. So this is just an option, and we're trying to think of ways to make it easier to vote, and to also take some of the disruptive impact off the schools by having voting on a Saturday when schools are not in session.
Great, thank you, Susan. I know we have a few people in line to speak, Pam, then Roger, but while we're in Article 5, I see that Tony Conti has a question about why are there 2 Saturday options versus limiting it to the last Saturday in March. I think you may have touched upon this, Susan, in order to give us some flexibility.
Yes, and also having looked at some other towns that have voting on Saturdays, a lot of them will have it on the first Saturday in April, to avoid having voting on the Saturday before Easter Sunday. I guess part of the thinking is that, every year is different. Some years there are actually 5 Saturdays in the month of March. So that's why it's more complicated, and there are 2 alternatives. And also about the presidential primary on the first Tuesday of March. Yes, I see your point that would be very close if we had that election on the earlier Saturday in March.
Great, thank you, Susan. Patty, can we allow Pam to speak?
So I have no problem going in order. My first question is not until Article 11. Should I wait until then to raise my hand?
No, go ahead, Pam. So I've just gone through all of the articles just so folks know what they are, and you can speak on any article that you'd like or multiple articles. So I'm just going to jump to Article 11.
Okay, I do have multiple articles. So on Article 11, I don't actually have an issue. I spent a lot of time with several very patient select board members who were incredible about explaining how the water and sewer rates work and what some of the factors are going into it. And I thank them greatly for that. I do still have a question because in our water and sewer rates, we are now also including a charge that includes the stormwater management stuff that it falls under MS4. And I'm curious whether or not a public education campaign has been considered and the funding to be able to conduct a public education campaign has been considered as part of what we are charging, and whether or not that's in the works or being planned.
So I can say that as part of the MS4 permitting process, there is a requirement in there to do a public education campaign. They provide us with some sample documents or sample activities for us to do. I would say that we're certainly open to any ideas on how to increase our efforts. I know that not everybody tunes into public meetings or goes to town websites. Sometimes this information does get into the local papers, but if there are other ways that we can have a better public education campaign, we are definitely open to those ideas.
Okay, I guess my idea, and I'll just say it quickly, is it's similar to the public meetings, I don't know whether they were hearings or meetings that they had on wind power, which I thought was excellent at clarifying a lot of misconceptions about what that aggregate energy program was. And then, and then having the one of them, or at least one of them, if there's more than one, be recorded and then available on WinCam. I still refer people to that wind power recording when people ask me questions about it and say, this explains a lot and answers a lot of questions. I think a format like that would be fantastic because it would allow people to ask questions and it would allow others to refer them to that recording after the fact so that people can learn about it. Sometimes the documents can be a little heavy and sometimes a verbal thing is more helpful and sometimes documents are. And also perhaps an easier place to find that information online. So those would be my suggestions there, but that's not for discussion at town meeting.
Okay, thank you, Pam. Do you have another article you'd like to comment on right now?
I do, and it's related to the capital planning report and the projects that they have. And I have a couple of concerns about some of the things that I've read in here. One has to do with I guess there's several concerns and I hope I don't take too long. Stop me if I'm taking too long. One is on the transfer station upgrades. I'm curious whether or not in some of the funds that they're seeking to work on that, whether they've included a consideration of increasing the fees to help pay for that. It's something that unfortunately could have been, if the fees had been raised a little bit and then the establishment of maybe a fund that existed to do these, something like an emergency fund or a maintenance fund to work on this so that it's a little bit more self-sustaining. So I'm just curious about how they've anticipated increasing fees reasonably and establishing funds and maintaining those funds so that in the future we don't find ourselves with $0 when something needs to be repaired or upgraded. So that's the first question I have. The other question I have is about the Highland Ave traffic project construction. That which is going to be deferred and submitted for next year's consideration. But I'm curious between now and next year, whether or not they plan on doing a public hearing, whether or not they've done studies about the people in that area and how they feel about it. And then also, and I have brought this up before, safety issues with respect to hospital access and ambulance in particular. If they're planning on putting islands on that road, does that impact the ability for an ambulance driver to go down that road and get an emergency situation to the hospital as quickly as possible during rush hour? If there's an island in the middle of the road and then cars on either side, it's a lot more difficult for an ambulance to drive around those vehicles, or for those vehicles to move out of the way to make a path that's big enough for the ambulance. And I'm just hoping that there's been a study on that safety and issue, and that also there's just been a study on the safety issue in that area in particular. Not that I don't think that safety on Highland Ave isn't important, it is very important, but there are a lot of other areas in town that have safety issues, for instance, Swanton Road and Cross Street. And I'm wondering if there have been studies that can help prioritize these things, and also an understanding of what people who live in those neighborhoods feel. Because I don't live in that neighborhood, so I don't want to speak on behalf of the people living there. And it may be something that they all want and is very important, but it's not clear to me as a town meeting member if it is. So I'd like to see that. And then they've got the Swanton Street Culvert project. I'm just wondering if, when they are presenting at town meeting, if they could provide a map of the work area, that would be helpful in sort of visualizing what they're planning on doing. And then the final comment I have on this is with respect to the Morocco upgrades and maintenance things, to sort of keep Morocco as viable as possible until that can get in the pipeline for rebuilding, which is 8 to 10 years into the future. And they listed what their highest priorities were. One of the things that was missing from that, and it could be that they're doing it and it's just not on the list, but it would be incredibly important to me that they do it. And I say this as a parent who has kids at the high school. So I'm not even in the Morocco district, but I cannot imagine, if I were a parent in the Morocco district, sending my children into that school, especially when the pandemic will not be over. The sinks are in the condition that they're in. So I'm hoping that, even though I didn't see it on the list of projects that they're going to be working on, that these sinks are part of what they are planning on funding from this year's funds that go toward capital projects and maintenance projects, so that those can be repaired and taken care of before students enter the school in the fall. So those are my questions about the articles, and I don't know if you can answer those, or whether that's something that you just pass along to the capital planning committee.
I'll do a little bit of both, Pam. Certainly I'll defer to Susan on whether the select board plans to have any hearings on Highland Ave. And
Yes.
I'll certainly check in with whoever is presenting the various articles at capital planning, whether they plan to include any visuals or if they can. And then in terms of any calculations that have been done, or some modeling that have been done to ensure that the transfer station improvements, that there is a rate increase as part of it. I will tell you that there have been some extensive modeling that have been done to not only look at the cost of improvements, but also at potential lines of revenue that could offset those costs as well. So there are a number of options that are being considered right now.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, go ahead.
No, well, I didn't. Susan, were you going to comment on one of those things, or because I still have that question about Morocco, but I don't want to cut off anybody.
Yeah, I do. Just about the traffic. Highland and Cross Street are both considered corridors, traffic corridors, and they get a lot of sort of commuter traffic in the mornings and afternoons. And they have both been studied, and the Highland improvements, the plan for that set of improvements, the plan is to have the traffic engineers do some further design, and I'm sure they will study the issue of ambulances because the hospital is right down at one end of Highland. But then when we have a little more detailed plans, then the select board would have the public hearing. I live in that area, and I have to say I'm a little skeptical about the islands or the number of islands in Highland Ave, but I think at a few locations, an island would make sense. So yes, there would be a further study and design and a hearing. And the other thing I was going to say was that we're trying to get some of the cross street improvements done with money through the Eversource project, along with some payments connected to the River Street residential project that is planned for that area as well. So we're kind of trying to marshal a number of assets and marshal our funds to get these traffic things done.
Excellent. You guys, I'm always impressed with how creative and resourceful you all are. Thank you.
You're welcome. And the town, town staff are the ones who really know how to do this, cobbling funds together. I have to hand it to them.
And Pam, I think your question for Morocco was related to the sinks. So those have already been replaced, and that's why they're not listed.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, Roger, you're next.
Hi. My first question is on Article 5. You mentioned safety issues, and I wondered what those would be, and also how long schools have been used for as a polling place. And up until recently, my recollection is that the schools were in session during the voting.
Well, Roger, I was on the school committee for a while, and I believe that the schools have been used for polling places for a long time. I don't really know when it started, and a lot of towns do use their schools as polling places. We're a small town. We don't have a lot of large public buildings, and the schools seem to be the most logical place. And yes, I can remember when my children were at Morocco, their school would be in session. I think people are more concerned nowadays about safety in terms of adults in the building at the same time as the students. There's a lot more security about going in to visit, so those concerns are heightened recently. And there's also a concern about the safety with a mix of voters and other vehicle traffic during a school day in the parking lots during the times when the students are being dropped off or being picked up.
So is there any evidence? I mean, there's concerns, but is there any evidence of a problem?
Not that I can name off the top of my head. I think there was some sort of accident in the region a few years ago, a traffic accident. But yes, do we have hard data that this is imperiling people presently? No, we just want to reduce the risks.
I can only speak to the more recent conversations, but certainly around the election this year, there was concern about taking away yet another in-person school day because those, were obviously valued. And in terms of any safety issues, our conversations were primarily around, cleaning of the school buildings. We usually, do a deep cleaning after, between the cohorts, and having a cohort go one day and then public coming in, and then having another cohort coming another day added, I think, another cleaning round to those particular schools in question. It sounds like Norman has a comment about there being a Saturday referendum vote back in June 1981. So certainly there's a history somewhere for Saturday votes. And Roger, did you have any other items or articles you want to speak to?
Yeah, but I don't want to get into them out of order here. So.
Okay, it doesn't look like there's anybody else in line. There's just one question in the Q&A that I can answer, but so Roger, if you want to continue.
Okay, well, on Article 7, there's a assertion that the that there that it was prohibitive to develop a particular property for affordable housing. What does that mean?
I'm sorry, when you say an assertion about affordable housing?
That it was the cost to redevelop the property into affordable housing was prohibitive. What does that mean?
Roger, it's Susan. One thing I would mention is that property, the lot is very, very small. So I think the concern is it would be difficult to build something that would really be suitable for a family to actually inhabit. And I don't really know, beyond that, there may be some other factors about that lot.
Well, the lot is small, but the existing house is small too. And affordable, I mean, you could either fix up the existing house or build a similar small house. I mean, it doesn't, there has to be some greater explanation than just say the costs are prohibitive. Any builder could build a house.
Well, I think
Roger.
the existing house is old, and we have a comment from a resident that the house is beyond repair, which doesn't surprise me. I haven't been inside, but I've driven by there and looked at the house. I think there's also some utility issues with that site. I mean, yes, there is an existing house, and once upon a time, people presumably lived in that house, but our standards of living have changed, and it's unclear to me that you could really build something there that would be useful.
But
So I just wanted to support that statement. Pete Lawson from the Department of Public Works did view that property last fall and did determine that it was in a shape that was beyond repair.
okay, so if it is it going to be sold for development, or I mean, who's going to buy it?
It could potentially be sold to an abutter who might be interested in expanding their lot. And if anybody does buy it for development, then the responsibility would be up to whoever purchases to do their due diligence.
But I mean, the question that hasn't been answered is why would it be prohibitive to build an affordable unit on that lot?
I think given the state of repair of the house, building anything on that lot would require subsidies, I think, beyond what the town has capacity for at the moment.
That I'm still not comprehending. I mean, you can build a unit. The costs of unit are fairly standard. Whatever makes that unit affordable wouldn't change particularly. I can't see how the lot itself would be prohibitive.
I think the point, Roger, is that the cost for any development there, whether it's affordable or not, is prohibitive for the town at the moment. And any developer. But we can certainly talk offline if you require more information.
Yes, I would like to have a better explanation of that.
Okay. Do you have maybe one or two more articles you'd like to speak about before I move on?
There was also reference to something about 20 years about this Article 25 appropriating something money to the Building Stabilization Fund in relation to Morocco somehow. What was that about? There was reference to the 20 years ago.
I think it was, sorry, it wasn't 20 years ago. I think it was about 10 years ago. I think in 2012, there was a energy efficient boiler at Morocco that was funded. Let me see if I can get the background. And that article is related to the debt service on that project.
I mean, we know that a boiler, that boiler is one of the things that's slated to be replaced. It was not an effective boiler for some reason, and it's been very problematic. But I don't understand what the what the point of this motion is here.
Roger, I can read you what is in the printed book, that essentially monies were used from the stabilization fund to finance the installation of the boiler in 2012.
Yeah.
The new boiler was projected to save at least $44,000 per year in energy costs, with the intent that a portion of the savings, $30,000, be transferred from the general fund to the Building Stabilization Fund each year to help support the debt service on the bonds for the boiler installation. So it has to do with financing the installation of the original boiler in 2012. And yes, the boiler should have lasted longer than it has.
So, but I mean, were these savings realized? What are we doing here? Did we forget to do this, or you know?
I think it might be an annual thing. I don't really know.
Okay, so I would like some clearer explanation of what this is.
Well, maybe I will check with capital planning.
Yeah, well, we will find more background on this, and Roger will, I think we've noted who made these questions, so we'll make sure to get the information to you, but we'll also post this information up on the website.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I see one question in the Q&A. I'm not sure if there's anybody else lined up to speak, but the question is, does the transfer station redesign include plans to deal with stormwater management from the facility? So the quick answer to that is yes. That is, to my knowledge, it does. And we can certainly find out exactly more about those plans. All right, is there anybody else who wishes to comment or ask questions on any of the articles? I don't see any hands up or anything in the chat or the Q&A. So if there are any other questions, please email my office or give us a call. We can certainly make sure that you have any of your questions answered and your comments logged.
I did have one question about the budget book. Are we not getting a paper copy of this?
The budget book is typically mailed out, I think about 10 days in advance of town meeting where it's going to be discussed. So in terms of May 3rd, you should get that about 10 days prior. So I think my
Okay.
understanding is that the finance committee has just finalized it and it should be sent out shortly.
Okay, good, good.
But I think it's also on the website right now. So it is. Okay. It's also on the website. Is there data to show voter turnout is increased by weekend voting? I don't know that, but we can certainly find that out. Okay, so Patty, we've logged all those questions and comments. And again, anything else, just email to the town manager's office, townmanager@winchester.us, or give us a call at 781-721-7133. Okay, thank you, everyone. Have a good night.